After spring break. There is no point in bringing Liz back and then just taking him home again for spring break. He'll come back after spring break.
I've been here for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
This year went by so fast. I think we have 6 weeks left.
All right. Ecology. This is one of my favorite topics. I mean, I love genetics too. Genetics is also a favorite topic. But this is what my degree is actually in. My bachelor's is wildlife ecology and conservation. So I think this is a lot of fun. I love the big, broad idea of how animals and plants interact with each other. And this, I think, is a favorite of a lot of students because this stuff really makes sense. This stuff is kind of a, no longer are we looking at microscopic, no longer are we thinking on a small scale, we are looking at a broad scale. We're looking at nature in a big picture way. We're tying together pieces of what we've been learning so far throughout this year, and now everything is starting to kind of relate to each other. So ecology is the branch of biology that deals with the relation of organisms to one another and to their physical surroundings. So how nature interacts, how organisms fit together, and it's the biotic and the abiotic. Biotic is living things, and abiotic is the non-living things. So living things are plants and animals, the deers, the frogs, the plants, the fish, and the abiotic are the non-living things like the dirt and the rocks and the air and the water. That's the non-living things. So how do all these things interact and work together to make an environment?
Isn't this when they had to make, I remember last year Maddie Mitchell was doing it in before practice, but like the chain of life chart thingy. I don't know.
They made a poster.
I remember she was working on it and it was like super detailed and like everything.
You guys don't make a poster. It was a detailed poster.
But it was like insanely detailed. And it was like just a normal piece of paper too, and it had like so much on it.
It's a college class after all. So there's also something called population ecology. It investigates the factors that influence, distributes, and the properties of a natural population. So a population is a group of the same type of organism, whether it's the same group of plants or the same group of animals. A population is, you could have a population of deer, or a population of the same species of fish, or a population of dandelions in a field. That's a population. And you can survey a population to see how that group of organisms is doing, how they change over time, things like that. Demographics is statistics that describe a population. So there are populations that studies based on people. There's a lot of population studies based on people. And we will look at some of those human population studies because there's an activity that we're going to do with human population studies because every 5 years, I believe it's every 5 years, they do a census of people in the United States, and they ask how many people are in your family, and are they male or female? And so you account for like, okay, for my family, there are 6 people in my family. They are this age, and they are boys or girls. And it's updated every year so they can kind of take a census and see how many have grown, how many have died, or just kind of get a guess every 5 years.
These chips have never crunched a song in my entire life. They're so loud I can't hear it. Like,
Maybe there's something wrong with your ears. Okay,
well, there
please
is,
stop
but
it.
she can hear it. Like, they're loud. It was close. Was it not close when you looked? Okay, well, I just closed it.
Yeah, I can hear it.
You guys are funny. You should hear the recordings from the anatomy class and some of the things that are on that because some of the students in there don't have filters. And I'm like, guys, we're recording. Come on now. So population is a group of organisms that interbreed with one another, and they're all of the same species. And it's important to remember that when they're interbreeding, they can produce fertile offspring. That's what makes a species. A species is a group of organisms that interbreed and produce fertile offspring. Population size is the total number of that population, and the densities is the number of individuals per unit area of volume. So, how compacted they are together would be the density of that area. So if they're really compacted together or really spread out, that would contribute to the density. So you could have a population of 100, but they could be really spread out, so they're not very dense. Or you could have a population of 100, which is the population size, and they could be really compacted together in one area, and so that would be a very dense population.
I always feel like they're like the baked ones, so they're like hard. They're so
I love
good.
the kettle cooked. The kettle cooked baked ones are so good. Those ones are the best.
Then there's something called population distribution, and this describes how the populations are spread out. You have clumped distribution. Clumped is actually a very common one. This is where the individuals are grouped together in a big group. We are actually, as humans, a clumped distribution species. We like to live together in clumps. Here you are.
I'm just talking about.
I would have been here earlier, but I got behind a dump truck going 30 on E and then 20 on the corner, so I was crashing out.
Where's my cookie?
Sorry.
Yeah,
Was
it's alright.
good.
It's alright. So clumped distribution is where the organisms will stay in a big group. There's a lot of reasons that they may have a clumped distribution. Protection is a big one. When organisms like these fish are in a clumped distribution, it's less likely that one fish is going to be eaten. It's more likely that your neighbor is going to be eaten than you are. Because if a predator were to come and swim into here and try and eat the fish, all the fish are going to scatter and it would really confuse the predator. So that is a great defense mechanism. For humans, it is a community thing. We like to live together in a community. So we are less likely to live alone and more likely to come together for convenience. That's why we have cities. Cities are a clumped distribution. And we have big cities and we have smaller cities. Harrisburg is a small place to live, but we all live next to Columbia, which is a bigger city. I live in Boonville, which is, smallish, but we live in a clumped distribution because it's convenient to have stores and to have amenities like hospitals and things like that within easy reach if we need it. So clumped distribution is pretty convenient for us as well. This shows a clumped distribution pattern, and the purple is a very high population and the yellow is a more distributed population where it's more spread out. But all of these places really have high populations, so Kansas City, St. Louis, and then here a little bit in Columbia. But all of these areas, major cities that are going to have really high distribution. So the United States is a very clumped distribution kind of place. These deserty areas obviously are going to be spread out. Nobody really wants to live in a desert.
Now here's the kicker, guys.
There are two other types of distribution. There's near uniform and random. Near uniform is You're not gonna see these very often in a population because it's really kind of rare that things are gonna be very evenly spaced in nature. You might see it like on birds on a telephone wire. The birds are very evenly spaced. That's a near uniform. Or you might see it in a nesting colony, like birds have evenly spaced their nests on ground in a nesting colony. So those are some examples of like near uniform, but that's really kind of a rare example. Random distribution is a little more common, like dandelions in a field or flowers in a field. There's really not a pattern to it. You pick up a dandelion, you blow the seeds disperse randomly. So random distribution is a little bit more common. And you might also see this in, trees in a field. That's a little bit more random too. A lot of plants have random distribution. But uniform distribution, that one is pretty rare to find. There will probably be a question on your next test about distribution patterns and which is the most common and why it's the most common and which is the most rare. So you would say which is the most common? Clump distribution, and which is the most rare? Uniform is the most rare.
Basically a music day. Okay, we'll have a music day in here, but here's the kicker, you ready? So you all better be listening to this, okay? It will be very loud in here, okay? Those of you who are bringing in your instruments, I do want you to tell class a little bit about how your instrument works.
I got all the way to Panera and
If you
forgot
don't
my
know,
note.
maybe you need to
My
talk to
dentist, so
Mr.
I went all the way
Barrett,
back to the dentist after I got
okay?
up here.
Call them Ecology.
And
Well,
stuff like
just go back
that.
'cause it's like pretty close. I just realized I forgot I did last
It's
year.
kind of neat to let you guys kind of
Go to
experience.
the dentist. That's tomorrow.
Now, the instruments I bring
I
in,
hate
I'll
the
bring
dentist.
in a
I
little
hate
pair
him so
drum
much.
set.
It hurts so bad.
Cymbals, probably not. I'm not real sure how, yeah, I might bring in cymbals. I could probably take them out of the house.
So here's some examples of these different patterns. This is in Google Classroom. So this is a clumped distribution pattern. So here are the like sea stars that are clumped. A near uniform with the penguins in a nice, neat, orderly pattern. And then a random, which are dandelions in a field.
Or, maybe you pick up my banjo and
Now, biologists frequently use sampling techniques to estimate population size, and we'll briefly talk about some of these sampling techniques. If you're interested in trying some of these sampling techniques, I do a lot of these in my wildlife conservation class, which I teach in the spring. So my wildlife students, we actually go out and do a lot of these. We do the plot quadrant sampling with them. Basically what this is, it's a type of technique that is really good with plants. It's not very good with mobile animals because it involves sampling an area and you put down, we use hula hoops, and you put down a hula hoop and you measure everything within the hula hoop and count it. But it doesn't work if the animal moves because when you walk up to the space, then if it moves, it's going to leave the space. So you need something that stands still, which is why this is really best with plants. And so you mark off an area, usually a field, and you measure the field and you put it into like squares. And you'll randomly select the squares in that field and decide which ones you measure by a random selection process, and then you'll lay the hula hoop over the random squares you selected, and then you'll count whatever thing, like say we were counting dandelions in the field. You'll count how many dandelions are within, this case, a hula hoop, how many dandelions are in your hula hoop, and then you'll use a simple math equation to determine how many dandelions are in the overall field. So we actually do this with my wildlife class. We haven't done it yet because we worked on water sampling and now we're doing soil sampling with my wildlife class. We collected water samples from around the school in the outdoor classroom and we ran water testing on it. And we collected soil samples and they just started the soil sample testing yesterday. We have to wait for some things to grow before we can actually do the sampling. It's not fun when everything's dead.
Okay,
Just do
is there
wildflowers.
anything?
They can pick whatever thing they want to sample in the field. And they get to each pick something different to sample.
How many people are in the class?
There's just 3 in the class this time. Last year I had a bunch. It was like 11, 12 students. So we were kind of running out of plants for them to sample because they each had to pick something different.
Alright. Any other questions? Okay, was there sitting there doing nothing, staring at
So here is how the quadrant sampling goes. You would mark off the field. So imagine that this is a field. So you would mark it off in squares, and then you would pick a random square, and then you would sample everything in that square. And this is showing how they would sample it. Again, we use hula hoops, and you would count everything that was in that square. And then you use a simple math equation to figure out, okay, if there are this many and this many squares, then there would be this many in the entire field. It just saves you the time of sampling the whole field, which would take forever. So you sample a portion of the field instead, and you estimate how many are in the entire field. There's also a mark and recapture method. This works better for a population that moves. So what you do for the mark and recapture method, we have not tried this yet. We haven't really had time, but for a mark and recapture method, then you would lay out traps and you would capture live animals, and you would mark the live animals. And so say in this case, they caught 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they caught 10 turtles the first day, and they marked them all by painting their shell red, and then they released the turtles back into the wild, and they waited a couple days so that the turtles had time to mingle back into the population. And then they set out another trap, and they caught turtles again the next time. And so they caught 10 more turtles. And of those 10 turtles they caught, they noticed that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 had red shells. So that means that they caught 5 that they caught before. And then 5 other ones did not have shells marked, so that means these are new turtles. So they had 5 that they caught previously and 5 new turtles. So you can put that into a simple math equation and figure out what the overall population is. Because they caught 5 from the first batch and 5 new ones, you can put that in a math equation and figure out how many are in the overall population.
Are we gonna have to do that?
No. This is just teaching you the process. We're not actually gonna do this. If you're interested in stuff like this, you can take the wildlife course to actually do these things. We don't have time to do this stuff in regular biology, but if you are interested in actually doing these things, you can take my wildlife course when we have the whole course dedicated, a whole semester dedicated to doing this stuff. So there are other ways that you can sample things. You can actually mark animals to track them. So sometimes deers are marked with a tag. Sometimes butterflies are marked. This one, it has a sticker on it with a label, so you can mark butterflies. In my regular zoology class, we do monarch tagging, where we tag the monarchs and release them. And during the fall, monarchs are migratory butterflies, and so we catch them in the fall and mark them with a sticker and release them. And that's a nationwide thing that we can be a part of. So we do that in regular zoology. There is another type of sampling that is called the line method, line intercept. So you lay a line down, and anything that is on this line, like if we're sampling these kind of scraggly plants, then we walk this line, and anything that's touching the line, we would count that as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plants. So that's another way you can do it. Because sometimes, like if you're counting trees, there's no way you can get a hula hoop over a tree. So this method is good for plants that are too big. So you would lay a line straight down, and you just walk the line, and then you would count like trees or really big bushes that are intercepting that line. So that's a line intercept method. We never had time to do the line intercept method, but that'd be good at like the outdoor classroom where there's a bunch of trees. Alright, so populations change and grow or shrink their population size. And that's called immigration or immigration. I don't know why. They're the same word, just different spellings. Immigration with an I is into a population. The movement of an individual into. So I into a population. Immigration with an E, think exit. Exiting out of a population. So this one is exiting, this one's moving into a population. So something is exiting, something's coming in. But if there's zero population growth, that means everything's equal. Births and the deaths are equal, nothing is going in or nothing is going out. So the population is staying the same.
I went to get a physical last night, and I couldn't get the girl said, "You have very strong legs." I was like, "Oh, you know, it's like the legs are so muscular." I was like, "Oh, is that a good thing?" Or, no, it's a good thing. She was just like,
The dentist girl?
no, the physical person last night at Hy-Vee.
Oh.
I went to get a physical last night because apparently I needed one ASAP in the next 24 hours.
Very strong.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a good thing.
no, I was cracking up. I was like, "Okay, thank you."
Alright, so we're done with notes. Look at that. Look at all the time we've got. All this time for our new assignments.
I knew it.
You can't give us a break.
Why don't we give you a break in a college class? Aw, I threw my mouse.
My sister is on spring break, and she's in college.
Well, it's not our spring break yet.
When is MACC's spring break?
Yeah. Is it after ours? So we have another 2 weeks off?
No.
Yeah, but that means we would have to do work until they have their spring break, and I don't want to do work over spring break.
Alright. I am going to post this. This is a case study that is talking about like population growth. And I like these case studies because it uses information from real life and uses real life data. So you can use these two websites that I linked because it goes with it. And it uses simulators, exponential growth and logistic growth. So these two simulators will help you out. Okay. So your new assignment is posted for you. Oh, I should probably stop the video.
They have these like little vibrating things that have water jets coming out of them, and they're like using like